Well, welcome. My name is Ariana, and I'm the health coach for Integrative Family Medicine of Asheville. And this is an interview that is part of our series on how we can use mindfulness as a tool to skillfully cope with what is challenging right now. And I'm so lucky to be joined by Scott MacGregor. Scott is a licensed clinical therapist and stress reduction educator with over 18 years of meditation practice, including retreats for mindfulness, meditation in medicine and research, insight meditation, and spiritual reflection. His MBSR certification is through Brown University, and he has participated in professional training under the direction of Dr. John Kabat-Zinn at the UMass Medical School Center for Mindfulness. And he also teaches mindfulness in many contexts, so working with the Asheville and Charlotte Fire Departments, the UNC School of Medicine, and more. And currently, he's about to start a virtual online 8-week program offered to anyone who wants to sign up. So we wanted to invite him in to talk today to just look over some questions of, how can we access mindfulness as a resilience tool? As we all know, pandemic fatigue is real, and stress, and, just this general challenge of uncertainty around what's coming next and what even is safe right now. And so I'm curious, with your experience, how you would describe the usefulness of mindfulness as a tool for folks right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're facing challenges we haven't ever experienced, really, at least in my lifetime. And so I would begin, I guess, Ariana, by saying, what are we even talking about when we're using the term mindfulness, right? Because there's a lot of misunderstanding, mistaking what it is. And so I generally like to just frame it from a science standpoint. The way it's being researched is mindfulness is considered the awareness that arises when we pay attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So just all that is just to say, like, being here right now, talking to you, and while this is virtual, we're still human beings. We're having this live interaction together, and being here with some clarity. And then that non-judgment piece is kindness. Just bringing, when you hear mindfulness, it's as much about the heart and the body as it is about anything that you're doing, thinking from a thinking perspective or cognitive perspective. And also, I just like to say what it's not. Right? Mindfulness is not some guaranteed quick fix, some panacea, right? I wish it were. It certainly doesn't help grow hair. But it's not a religion or a relaxation technique. And it is certainly not about trying to empty the mind, trying to clear the mind of all thoughts. I mean, good luck with that, right? I mean, our mind secretes about 40,000 thoughts a day, so it's just not going to happen. But if we can get a little bit of relief to some degree, and I think there are 3 areas where mindfulness can directly affect our capacity to meet these challenges right now. The first is, I said in that understanding of what it is, just the awareness, right? So just having some awareness that, maybe this isn't the time to be parenting like full on, right now. Maybe in this moment when, something's cooking on the stove and I just had to take a call from my boss and, somebody's diaper needs to be changed. Maybe just like taking a breath, right? Yeah, like you just did, like just taking a breath with all of life showing up. But if we're not aware, right? If we don't bring some kind of awareness to that, we're not even going to know that we're hooked, that we're caught in this stress cycle. And so just awareness to begin with. And then secondly, a Harvard study, in fact, I think this was a title of the research article, and a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. So secondly, mindfulness can help us to turn down the volume of time travel that our mind naturally does. It's an area called the default mode network in the brain, and it's jumping between the past and the future. And it has a lot to do with the story of me, right? Starring me, all about me. And so when we practice mindfulness, what we're doing is practicing the capacity to let go of some of that identity story and actually tune into what the heck actually is happening in this moment, as opposed to our overlay, our perception of what's happening.
Yeah.
And so I think it can be really helpful there. And then if we are aware in that moment, we could take a few slow, deep breaths, right? And that can help ground, settle the nervous system, even a few slow breaths, even while we're washing the dishes or driving, it has a lot of physiological benefits. And I'm sure you've talked to many of your clients and patients about just breathing, just more skillful breathing, utilizing the full capacity of the lungs, breathing horizontally instead of vertically. And with awareness, we might utilize that very easy to reach lever more frequently. And then I would say probably the third area is in regards to our capacity to interrupt our reactive patterns, right? So a stressor shows up, like something shows up that's stressful, right? That call from your boss. And rather than reacting, right, mindfulness affords us the capacity, the opportunity to pause, right, in between that stressor, right? This is not going to make all your stress go away. In fact, at the fire department or the medical school, we didn't go in and say, well, you just need to make medical school nicer and, give them more time off. And, the fire department, we don't want them to have to climb a ladder quite as high. They would have said,
Make it less scary and less demanding.
Exactly.
We did not do that.
That's right. No, so it turns out that when we can pause, when you take that, what I would call a rapid reset, that we much more likely have a chance to respond to life, to respond to the situation versus reacting, which oftentimes can actually be an accelerant to the stress. It can actually make things worse when we're reacting all over the place. One person at the fire department says it's like stacking failures up on top of themselves. The stressor comes, a reaction. So a bigger stressor goes on and we react even more. And so, you've probably had, I know I have had experiences where I'm in an interaction, a conversation with somebody, particularly like at home, right? The people we care about the most can be the most stressful. And it just gets amped up. And so if we can just take a break. Yeah. So those are some areas and yeah.
Can I reflect back what I heard you say?
Sure, absolutely.
There's a lot in there. So one, what mindfulness is, it's paying attention in the moment without judgment and just noticing what's happening and building an awareness of what's happening. And it's not a panacea. It's not a Band-Aid. It's not a perfect fix. It's not a religion or a spirituality, really. It's just this practice of building awareness of what's happening. And I love when you broke down kind of the 3 ways it can be useful right now. One, awareness and just noticing what's happening and then being able to pause. And it sounds like when we build that awareness, we're actually building a mental capacity to step outside of the stress or step outside of what's happening and observe it without that critical, judgmental, hurry, worry, fear, wandering mind way of thinking. And that can be helpful. And then beyond that, if we can then kind of like put a leash on the mind or a tether to anchor ourselves into like what's actually happening right now. Like my brain's thinking about the 5 work deadlines I have and my child who like he's gonna need to get to bed early and I need to get out the door to get this thing done. But right in this moment, my hands are in the warm soapy water and I'm washing dishes. Like actually this is okay right now.
Yeah.
And if we can practice those skills, then that helps us to respond and not react. And then we can diffuse situations instead of stacking failures or stacking reactivity and kind of negative feedback looping.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in fact, that Harvard study found that even when we're doing stuff we didn't like taking the trash out or doing the dishes or whatever, changing a diaper, we're actually happier when we're present for that experience as opposed to, dreaming about some fantasy that may or may not, happen in the future or ruminating on some path that we have no control over.
Or caught up in the story of me. I love how you said that too, that often when we're in that like drifting thinking of the future or the past, it's often a story about ourselves or it's about how we failed this thing in the past or we didn't do it well enough or in the future what could go wrong. I don't think I'm just projecting. I think that's a common human thing that when we're in that place, that's what we tend to fixate on is the negative. Instead
right. And so that capacity in cognitive behavioral therapy, it's called awfulizing, right? It's a mind trap. Awfulizing.
That's the official term, awfulizing?
well, that's I don't know.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, or catastrophizing, or these mental traps that we find ourselves in, black and white thinking, always, never. When you start to see, you become aware of these, you can see how corrosive they actually can be to our overall well-being and to our capacity to be engaged. And yeah.
Absolutely. And if it's corrosive to our well-being and we're already under a lot of pressure and stress and uncertainty, then that's going to show up in a different way than it might have a year ago. The place where we're vulnerable now, there's more pressure on those parts of ourselves in this moment than there was maybe a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Thank you. That's such a broad spectrum way of thinking around how mindfulness, in terms of paying attention in the moment without judgment on purpose, gives us tools to direct our experience of life with more intention and enjoyment and kindness, and towards ourselves and towards others. And I'm curious, because I know you're starting your class next week, which is a mindfulness-based stress reduction course that is 8 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Yeah. And how is that going to offer something different than using Insight Timer or just a meditation app to do a 5 or 10 minute sit? What would be important about considering the MBSR course?
Well, let me come upstream a little bit from the question, and then I'll definitely answer. But let me just say, right now, and you've pointed to this, Ariana, that I would encourage people to reach and use whatever lever is available to them. Like, I'm sure that as a health coach, you're talking to them about nutrition and exercise, healthy sleep, social connection, reducing stress, electronics, so forth. Like whatever people can access, right? I'm going to add my voice of encouragement. Even before meditation, there's a saying that, the best exercise is the one you'll do. So the best well-being practice is the one you'll do. So if the one you're going to do is like to work on your sleep or to try to create some habits around sleep, then, anyway, I would encourage.
No, I appreciate that, because that also ties in neatly to, this is not a one thing fits all, you do this in order to be okay. Self-regulating in any way through getting sleep and food and exercise, connection, stress reduction is fantastic. And this is one option. And if it's something that feels accessible, then great. But let's do what's within reach.
Right. And here's what I'll say to that, is that the research indicates that people who score higher on what is called trait mindfulness. So we have state mindfulness. So if we were going to do a practice, you might experience through some guidance, like, oh, I'm actually here right now. Like, I'm actually present in this moment. Trait mindfulness is something that is more embedded in our moment to moment and hour to hour and day to day, year to year experience, that we sort of have built this capacity more, and we can grow that. And what they find is that people who have a higher trait mindfulness actually engage in healthier behaviors, like exercise, like better nutrition, and so forth. But so let me answer your question directly, though, and just say that first, I would say the difference between doing an app like Insight Timer, which is free and wonderful, and I use all of these that I'm talking about, and then the other one I would recommend very highly is Healthy Minds, which is out of the University of Wisconsin, from Richard Davidson and his lab.
About that one.
Free as well. Yeah, wonderful. So, it's great. And so I would say the dose first, right? The dose of is different. And we know in the research on mindfulness-based approaches that dose matters. Like, it does have an effect. Like, the more you do something. And so in MBSR, you're getting about 28 hours of classroom time, and then about 35 hours of home practice time if you do all the practices. So it's a pretty rigorous, so that'd kind of be so the dose is the first thing. And then the second thing, I think, is that this is a systematic and rigorous kind of curriculum, right? So somebody who is really struggling with regulating their nervous system, like way out, like they might be experiencing like heavy dysregulation, like even like traumatic responses, might not be the right time for MBSR. Maybe just laying on the floor and just settling the body. And there are lots of great practices on both those apps that can be supported there. But if somebody does have the capacity, then it's a really significant exploration of the mind, and the mind-body connection and stress. And evidence suggests, because MBSR is the most researched mindfulness-based intervention in the world, that it has a positive impact on sleep, on immune system function. I mean, they're drawing blood in people who are going through these MBSR courses, and lots of different participants. So not just, middle class, white individuals or something, but across a broad range, medical and psychological and life conditions. Yeah. But in addition to those, we've seen benefits in reductions in perceived stress, reductions in depression and anxiety, reductions in attention issues, and positive responses in well-being and positivity. And so there's I would say now there's a body of science that supports that protocol, mindfulness-based stress reduction, and the apps, being 5 to 6 years old, just don't have the same depth of research, but it doesn't mean they don't work. So I use them, and I'm very supportive of them, and it's what people feel, the capacity. But for right now, and more in the early decades of this research on the mind and training the mind. So I don't want
to summarize and just reflect, make sure I understand correctly. It sounds like first and foremost, any degree of taking care of the body is going to help, right? So when you get enough sleep, that changes how you can respond to stress. When you get exercise, it can help reduce stress and increase your endorphins, increase your, boost your immune system. There are many ways we can take care of our physical bodies and nurture our health. And for someone who's in a kind of emergency state where they're very flooded or very, having a big stress response, MBSR might not be the right fit for this moment, and something more like just lying down or working with a therapist, but something else might be more appropriate for this moment. However, if you're just wanting to really learn more about your mind and your body and get a bigger dose that it has structure and is science-based and has some degree of like a learning curve where you're learning about the science here, and then you're practicing in a group virtually, and then you're going home and you're practicing more, so that you're giving your brain and your body bigger doses of what this kind of practice can do, then this would be a really good fit. It doesn't discount the value of other forms of meditation or mindfulness practice, but ultimately, science-wise, the bigger the dose of mindfulness practice, the bigger the outcome for seeing effects in stress, sleep, overall well-being.
Yeah. So let me add let me just comment on 3 things there. So first off, let me just say that when John Kabat-Zinn developed this curriculum over 4 years ago, he went in and designed it for human beings in the medical system, like who were suffering with enormous amounts of pain and distress. So there are lots of people who have severe depression in the classes that I teach, or panic attacks, not in the class per se, but they're experiencing those. So I want to say that what I encourage people to do is come to the information session and then talk to me if they're not sure about is this the right time. Like somebody in active addiction, this is not the right class. This is there's mindfulness-based relapse prevention. So there are other avenues
that are targeted specifically to support that challenge.
Yeah. If there's a particular area. The other thing I'd say is that this is a shared journey, that you're in this class with other people, and the apps are mostly you're by yourself. And so that is a powerful mechanism. We know whether it's exercise or nutrition or obviously social connection, but any of these things enhanced by people going through the same kind of bumping into the same issues and having the same or similar, kinds of, and really your life is the curriculum. Yeah. So
that's great. So I did not know that the MBSR program originated with John Kabat-Zinn, specifically designing it for people who are in the hospital system and navigating some really hard and painful physical experiences. I didn't know that. So it's really great. Thank you for kind of pointing that as this is not that this isn't completely accessible for people in a wide variety of life states, pain states, etc. It just might be good to attend the information session, check in with you, and see if it's a good fit, if this feels accessible. Sounds like
Yes.
any tool that you can use for mindfulness might be a good idea to experiment with. And paying attention to where you are in your life and what your needs are, and really tailoring what you choose to do with what you're ready for and what's appropriate also makes sense. I just have one more question, which is, I know that because you've done a class for us in the past, you've spoken a little bit to how folks can sustain a mindfulness practice over time. And I speak with a lot of patients who have thought about starting a mindfulness practice or a meditation practice, but they struggle to get it into their schedules, or they struggle to be consistent with it. They might be able to do it for a while, but not keep that dose steadily being received every day over time. Do you have any advice to offer folks who are in that place?
Well, I wish there was like a simple answer. I wish there's a simple answer. I wish it was easy. I wish it was easy, right? If it was easy, then everybody would do it. So I want to start by saying that we spend probably 80% of our cognitive attentional energy on our goals. Like, where do we want to get to, right? And about 20% of our energy on building habits. And really, we need to flip that to sort of increase the surface area for good things to happen, which is what we all want. We need to make that 80% habits and 20% goals. We need goals. We need goals to help us filter like what we do and don't want to do, right? But what we really want to put is time into building healthy habits, building positive habits. And the way we do that, yes, exactly. Yeah, on a daily basis, and at least a regular basis. And so the way we do that, I think, Ariana, is first by starting small. Like just pick something really small. In the case of, I'm sure you can come up with lots of ideas around exercise and nutrition. For meditation or mindfulness, I would say an active practice is as good as a stillness practice. So doing something without what's called a high cognitive load, so something you don't have to think about, like folding the laundry. Like I really want to be present for this 5 minute. I'm folding it anyway. Let me actually be really present while I'm folding it. You set a timer and say, okay, well, now I don't have to be present anymore. I can let my mind go anywhere. But for this next 2 minutes or 5 minutes, I'm going to actually, do this with as much attention, non-judgmentally as I can, or washing the dishes, or I don't know, even going for a walk. Like when you're out walking, I'm just going to really be in nature, as opposed to in my last meeting or in that last argument I had with somebody in my family.
Or trying to get the perfect picture or whatever it is. Yeah.
So
using daily life as a door to open into presence, which makes so much sense. If you're busy enough to find 10 or 20 minutes to sit down and meditate, why not make it as a meditation practice?
Yeah, if we can draft off an existing behavior and utilize that as a way to bring a practice, and this applies to really any kind of habit change, but for meditation, if we can apply like what we use with the firefighters is before they go home, when they drive home or when they get off the bus, and they can sit on a park bench or sit in their car up the street or in the driveway for 5 minutes. And let me just leave what happened at work, because some intense things may have happened at work before I go in, so that I'm more grounded, so that when I go in, so they're in that moment anyway, they're there. And so they're just pausing to take some time. So keep it simple. And then doing it now, like do it right away. Like most of you say, well, when are you going to start that? Right? Oh, January 1st, I'm going to start it then, or I'll start on Monday, or but just to do it right now. When you finish watching this little video, go wash your hands for a minute and actually try to bring full awareness to just the simple act of washing your hands, which is one we do with the medical students regularly. And then the third thing is pretty simple as well. Repeat it, because the brain is an organ of experience. The more we do something, the more neurological pathways, right, that get connected. So the neurons that wire together fire together, something called neuroplasticity. And so then what happens is the washing your hands is a reminder to be mindful. Do you see? So it begins by, I'm bringing mindfulness to wash my hands, but then washing hands becomes this trigger itself, this cue that actually helps us come back into the moment. So when we walk back into our beautiful child's bedroom to read a bedtime story, we're actually there, we're actually alive. And so that's what I would say, is that all this stress has really, I think, stolen, or in some ways taken so much of our lives, our capacity to flourish and to thrive. And so I don't want to minimize this stress and challenge by saying, oh, well, just be in the present moment and all your problems will go away. That's ridiculous. But can we reclaim, even for some moments each day, our own lives? Because this is the show, right? This isn't rehearsal. Like right now, talking to you, this is it, man. Anyway,
this is life happening, and right now it's different and unprecedented for those of us who are alive in this moment. And that doesn't mean that there aren't these opportunities where we can re-anchor ourselves to what is happening in this moment. Right now, I'm sitting on my couch and I'm talking to you, and I'm not, in the office, or I'm not actually out in public needing to be masked. Like where the brain wants to go sometimes takes us away from being fully alive and fully noticing the precious moments of our family or of daily life. And that builds stress, that builds that cycle of what did you call it earlier when you were talking about the study that was done around people being happier when they're present taking out the trash can?
Yeah. When you're, a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. Even when you're doing something pleasant, like, going on a hike or something. So I think if we begin to think of training the mind, which is what we're trying to do with the medical students and the firefighters and physicians and school teachers and students, if we can treat it like almost like brushing your teeth, right? That's something that we just don't even really think about. We take that time for that sort of dental hygiene. We do the same kind of thing. Hygiene. Exactly. Yeah.
And I want to just, one other thing that I want to mention or reflect, because it was so, I think, important. When you described the firefighters leaving work and sitting on the bench and mentally letting what was hard or crazy or intense about their day go so they didn't carry it home, I think that the weight of carrying that around all the time and not even realizing it, that's really heavy. And I think that's part of the pandemic fatigue for many of us, is not having enough moments where we can set down the news and where we can just be with our kid reading a book or just be doing the dishes. And no, we don't need to escape the reality of what's happening. But we can be mindful in the moment to attend to what we're actually doing in that moment, because maybe it's safe and fine and wonderful.
Yeah, beautifully said.
Oh, thanks. No, I am so grateful to you for sitting down and talking with me and kind of guiding me through some of these questions, because I think that, there's a hype around mindfulness, and yet there's also a lot of science around how it can be a tool for resilience and a happier or more healthful life. And so thank you so much.
You're welcome. Can I share one last quote from
absolutely.
My hero, Mr. Rogers from PBS's Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood?
Oh, absolutely. My hero too.
Yeah, right. So he would say, and I think this is really, one thing the pandemic, I think, has shown me, and I think many of us, is that while we had to be isolated, locked down, separated, it's really shown us our interconnectedness, our interdependence. And Mr. Rogers said that human connection is primary in all of living. When the gusty winds blow and shake our lives, if we know that people care about us, we may bend with the wind, but we won't break.
Oh, wow. So true, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful quote. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah.
It's really true.
So, thanks for inviting me, and it's wonderful to spend time with you.
Likewise. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.